construction documentation phase of the high school auditorium project. To summarize it very quick, tasks upcoming as we gear up to getting this ready for bid, schedule and timeline and budget estimates, and then we can open it up for questions and further discussion. To be frank with you, there is not a whole lot of change on schedule or budget from the last time we spoke, so should be a pretty familiar presentation to you tonight. What has happened since the last time we talked? We proceeded into the construction documentation phase. Big part of that is drawing details, a lot of nuts and bolts kind of things, kind of behind the scenes stuff, as well as developing the renderings further so we can share them with you and the public tonight. We continue our biweekly coordination meetings as we've been doing. Our acoustical consultant has issued a report with their recommendations for the acoustical treatment in the auditorium from all aspects, including sound isolation, internal room acoustics, mechanical separation, things like that. The land development process has been going very well. Everything was submitted to the township and BCCD, the Berks County Conservation District. From the township side, everything is approved, subject to that's a conditional approval subject to completion of reviews by other agencies involved, like water and so on and so forth. And we've been talking, of course, with the fire department, making sure everything is good to go in that aspect as well. Berks County Conservation District, administrative and technical reviews are both complete at this point. So we are going very well from a land development standpoint. We had a preliminary meeting with the code official, and that was very encouraging and productive. So we have them kind of on the same page as we are at this point as far as any code aspects. So I think we should be able to submit this to the township for plan reviews with little surprises. So looking forward to a pretty smooth process on that front as well. We did engage Fox Rothschild to start assisting us with the front end specifications. We're using the specifications, the front ends, kind of the legal portions of the specifications. We're using the previous project as the basis, so we know Jennifer Hanlon's from Fox Rothschild has been helping out with us a lot on that front. She did a very thorough review of the last go-round, so we're using that as our starting point this time. So again, that process should be much more straightforward as well. And then, as always, we're meeting with the administrative team throughout the process to share with them what we are proposing and to get and receive and implement feedback from them. So these are all images that you've seen already. So of course, here you see the proposed new addition footprint kind of superimposed with the surrounding high school facility, the upper house as you would call it. So of course the blue area is the new addition with the additional accessible parking kind of right across the drive from that. And then the kind of area to the left side that you see in gray under the existing parking lot is approximately the area that will be disturbed for the new stormwater drainage system that's required for this addition. I had mentioned to you before that we are going to be doing some connections from here down to the lower house to send our storm and sanitary to. That's just by nature of where the elevations of the existing storm and sanitary are. So we needed to find a way to get it to an elevation compared to, you know, where the floor level of this addition is going, so that everything flows smoothly. We did meet with the fire marshal as well, and we're going to take a proactive approach with them and adding a fire hydrant close to within 100 feet of the fire department connection that we are proposing. The fire department connection that we have as part of this addition is in the kind of northwest corner of the blue area that you see there. So we'll be adding a fire hydrant as well. That's in response to what we understand is forthcoming requirements of the township, having additional fire hydrants. Looking internally, this diagram, again, same as you've seen it before. The new construction area shown in blue and the renovation area shown in yellow. So as you can see, the new construction is largely the auditorium, stage, and kind of backstage spaces like the costume and changing rooms and dressing rooms. There's a media and control room as well. And then you can see the band, choral, and orchestra rooms. They are what mostly comprise of what is currently the existing auditorium. And they have, of course, their ancillary spaces around them too. Practice, storage, offices, so on and so forth. Again, I've shared this with you before. This is the proposed seating layout. So we're at about 1,160 seats. We're going to do one final pass with the seating rep before we issue this to bid. But 1,160 seats and 210 upstairs. So the difference will be downstairs. So that's what, 970 or so? 950, sorry. Some updated imagery for the exterior elevations, only slight changes. One of the comments before was getting a little bit of the red in the Bulldog's collar and bringing the colors out there. So that's what we did. As you can see, the curtain wall has a lot of sun screening on it, vertically oriented. That's for as the sun comes across the sky westward throughout the day, it can deal with the westward light more effectively than horizontal sunshades. As you walk down the site a little bit further, because of them being angled off of the curtain wall, the visual effect of them kind of disappears. It's a pretty neat effect. So you can kind of see the Wilson Performing Arts Center inside of it. And not to give away the video, but it ends in kind of an evening dusk shot that you can see how the building glows. It's really fascinating. So this is what you would see when you walk into the lobby. So of course we're proposing, using the Wilson colors in a striking way. You can see to the left the Bulldog Events. It's kind of the ticket booth, but also taking a dual role as like a security station throughout the day. The gymnasium entrance is further down on the left side. And then you can see the hallway that leads back to the new music corridor beyond that. To the right, as you would enter, there would be location for displays that can show anything from announcements, the day's menus, upcoming events, performances coming into the auditorium, events in the gymnasium. There's a lot that can be done with that. Then as you turn to the right, this is the entrance to the Performing Arts Center. So you can see we're giving it a similar treatment to the gymnasium, kind of having a similar language throughout the design, with kind of a red entranceway with signage above it. And then to the right you can see some seating areas in front of the curtain wall. Should be a very inviting space. Here's a look a little bit closer at the gymnasium entrance. So you can see we're incorporating kind of a display alcove. We can bring over the Bulldog statue that you currently have in the auditorium lobby. So we can kind of have that continuity between the old and new. And then, as we showed before, we have a location for the new Distinguished Alumni Wall, which is currently in the existing auditorium lobby, with enough space for expansion at your current rate of, I think you said 3 to 4 additional persons per year for the next 25 or so years. And just beyond that would be the Fallen Heroes Memorial. relocated from the existing lobby. So this is a new image that I think will be new to most of you. Inside of the auditorium, you can see here, this is just underneath the balcony overhang above you. So you can see looking down toward the stage, to either side would be screens, digital screens for announcements or whatever you choose to use for your performances. There is an orchestra pit in front of the seating area, between the seating area and the stage. You can see some wood treatments kind of surrounding the proscenium opening of the stage that draws attention, focuses your attention to the stage, and then kind of a band of it up to about 8 to 10 feet above floor level. All of that wood treatment on each side is acoustical treatment that's diffusing specifically the sound from the stage back to the listener's ears. So it's kind of dealing with bandwidths and things a little bit beyond my expertise, but that's why we have the acoustical consultant involved. The red and black panels above them are also diffusing panels, so they are slightly bowed. That also helps spread the sound in a more ideal way than a simple flat wall would. You can see, again, more diffusing panels hung from the ceiling. Those as well are bowed above you, again, to help reflect and diffuse the sound from the stage out to the seating areas, including the balcony levels too. You can see hints of the catwalk above those ceiling hung clouds, and that catwalk is where a lot of the theatrical lighting will be kept, so that's all accessible and easily replaced and maintained throughout the year. Any questions here? This is a new image. Similar image from balcony level. So you can see the views out to the stage are quite clear from the balcony level. You can see a little bit more of the orchestra pit below. So the orchestra pit can be accessed from each side of the stage, and then the side to the left also has a wheelchair lift down to it, so anybody would be able to use it. So this is a little bit of a walkthrough, kind of putting all those images together to give you kind of a more realistic sense of how you would experience it. So this is coming down the drive, and you can see how the effect of those sunscreens kind of diminishes as you get further down there. You can see more and more through, which, like I said earlier, you'll see has a striking effect in the evening time. And then, of course, when you walk in, you see a large portion of the lobby, and then as you turn right, you start to see the Performing Arts Center side of it. And it comes around, you can see where the seating areas are. And this is what it will be like as you enter. So when you walk in to the auditorium, your first space that you hit is actually the light lock, and this is specifically designed to keep light from glaring into the stage area when there's a performance going on. So you kind of walk outward and then in. So the light has no direct path to the stage from the lobby. You can see the overhang of the balcony above you. This is a look back from the stage area. So you can see all the acoustical treatment going on here. There's quite a lot of it, so it should be a very high-performing acoustic space. Again, a view from the balcony. It's the Fallen Heroes and Distinguished Alumni walls. And again, I'll say we are anticipating having some discussions with those involved with the current Fallen Heroes Memorial so that we can kind of see their vision through to the new version of it as well. This is walking back the hallway to the music corridor. To each left and right side right there is the overhead doors so that things can pass from the scene shop over to the stage. And then the next three views are each of the music classrooms. This is the orchestra room. So that red bulkhead that you see beyond there is actually a portion of the existing structure that we're working with to fit the orchestra room into. The orchestra room, interestingly, kind of straddles the new and the existing. So the band and choral rooms, you see, we use a similar red bulkhead all the way around it. These are kind of landlocked spaces. They don't get any natural light, so we were trying to do something that pops the ceiling up a little bit visually and gives a nice surround around it as well. Here, of course, is the choral room. And then there's a look at nighttime. And that's the end.
Thank you, Sean, for the updates. Are there any?
I'm sorry, that's the end of the video.
Oh, okay. I was gonna
So coming up, construction documentation, we'll be finalizing the details and specifications. We'll be recording the land development plans over the next few weeks as we get those final tasks worked out with the township. We'll be also submitting all the plans to Spring Township for a code approval, which would set us up for permitting the project. The plan is to issue the project to bid on September 7th, pending the school board approval, which I believe will happen at the August 21st school board meeting. And then based on a 4-week bid period, that would set the receipt of bids to October 5th. We could also work out an extension, as contractors often ask for, and we would just want to make sure that we kind of get a handle on anything else that might be bidding out there. What we don't want to do is have some other project bids due the same day. Contractors could drop out of one of them. We certainly wouldn't want it to be ours. So I don't see any issues doing that. We can set up that schedule as the contractors request if needed. We would then present the bid results to the school board on October 16th. And a board vote on the bids on November 6th. So that's kind of looking down the line a little bit. This kind of puts that into flow chart form. So of course today, August 7th, we're in the final stretch of the construction documentations phase. The board approval to issue the project to bid would therefore occur on the 21st if you so chose to do so. Then that approximate bidding window, the September, October, culminating the bidding period or bidding phase at that November 6th meeting. And then getting a start on construction within a month or so after that, a month, maybe two. Again, like I said before, the plan would be for the auditorium to be ready for the winter 2025 concerts. To give you an idea, from January 2024, 20 months would lead you to August of 2025. And I think that's an appropriate duration for the construction of this project. I've showed this chart before. Basically, in short, we're finalizing the Spring Township process with the outside agency approvals. And once we get those, we'll be recording the plans with the township. Berks County Conservation District process is complete. And again, this is the same budget that I presented the last time I met with you. I believe that was in June. So our bottom line is at $22.9 million right now. Estimated bid day cost is currently at just under $20 million, 19.6. And then when you add in all the related soft costs, and additional soft costs, including professional fees and everything that's been you've seen expense so far, like acoustic consulting, geotech, so on and so forth. That'll bring you to just under $22.9 million. That does include a allowance of just under $600,000 for furniture and equipment, which should be sufficient for what this project is. Now,
Let's try that again. Thank you, Sean, for the update. Do we have questions from board members? Mr. Negrini.
Sean, just for confirmation, you have construction potentially beginning January of '24. Would that be some initial construction that the current spring musical, which is, you know, the biggest show utilizing the auditorium, would they be able to complete their show?
I think we
Prior
could
to getting
set
into
up
the-
that phasing to allow you one final performance this spring in the existing space. I think we're largely considering this a one-phase project, but it might be like a 1A and 1B, where just the start point for the 1A, which is kind of the new construction area, would start immediately. And then after the spring, we could get them into the balance of the space to start the demolition work.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question, thank you.
One question about the auditorium set up there with the orchestra pit. Is that always open, or is there option to cover that with extended staging?
So, thank you, that's a good question too. Part of the theatrical equipment package will include a stage platform that's actually 2 levels. So when the orchestra pit is, you know, when you have people down there, of
Sure,
course, you have
yeah,
nothing there,
yeah.
except for the people, their instruments and related equipment. It can be brought up to the house level, so you can bring in additional seating in front of it, non-fixed seating, and then it can be brought up to stage level above that. So it's basically an extension of the stage. So with that area, there's 3 levels of potential use.
Okay. So those railings you showed are then obviously removable if you.
Yes,
said it's extended, right? Okay.
so they are removable if you're using it at the house level.
At the house level, yeah.
And then if you're using it as a stage extension, it would just come out right at the very edge of it on top of them.
Okay.
Sean, great presentation, thank you. The question on the sound system with the acoustical engineers, if we talked about this probably a year or so ago with, if we were going to do live streaming and trying to avoid every parent with a cell phone, you know, trying to record a concert, has the acoustical consultants, have they looked at microphone placement for, you know, bringing that through a centralized board so when we do stream, you know, musicals or plays that people can actually hear it online?
I think that's a little bit more of an AV item, less so from the acoustical kind of, the acoustical consultant looks at like internal room acoustics and sound isolation, both mechanically and external sounds. And then we would go to the AV group to get that worked out. I'm not sure I personally know the details of it that well, but I could certainly look into that and get back to you on it.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions from the board, thank you, Sean. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much for all your work.
And I might just stay here if that, is that appropriate or go ahead? Okay, thank you.
So our next communication piece is presentation on Phase 2 construction and renovation projects. Dr. Trickett is going to take the lead.
All right, well, thank you, Sean. Before we dive into Phase 2, I just want to again thank Sean and his entire team, our team, the board, everyone that's been part of this, our teachers, our administrators. There's a lot of work that goes into what Sean just presented, and I know we understand that. So many people are involved in bringing recommendations and kind of working through each facet of what he presented to you. And I'm just really excited, again, to be back in this opportunity, in this position, to be able to bring forth a recommendation of a pretty largely reduced scope Performing Arts Center, but I think one that really addresses most, if not all, of the needs that we set out striving to address back in 2018, and I know probably long before that. So I'm thankful, but I'm also excited about the possibility of next steps. So thank you for all of your work and commitment to our kids here at Wilson. So as we bring forth to our community and our board this recommendation here in just a couple weeks around Phase 1, we also have been working very diligently around one of the largest issues I think we have presently before us, which is the growth of our organization. Growth from the standpoint of students and kids that we serve, growth in our community, from our local municipalities, as evidenced by the new construction that we all see driving around, wherever it is that we're going on a daily basis. This recommendation today was also brought forth previously at different times throughout the last 4 or 5 years, and we've taken a lot of the feedback and learnings that we've experienced from those presentations and conversations with the community, with our staff, with the board, to heart when we made these recommendations. So today, what you're going to see is a recommendation for how we are proposing to move forward to address the overcrowding at our elementary schools and our middle schools. And we're going to walk through a variety of different pieces of this for the next 20 or 30 minutes. So before, I just want to bring us back to this slide. We've talked about this slide quite a few times. And it's just really our operational guiding principles for our buildings. I'm not going to read all of these, but essentially these are the things that we keep in the back of our mind that we talk about when we're making informed recommendations on how we want to move. You know, we talk about safety, we talk about efficient programming and effective programming. We talk about the cost, making sure that we're being mindful of the recommendations we're bringing forth, that they achieve the majority of our goals while also being mindful of the cost that's pushed down to our taxpayers. Making sure that we're planning for the future. Not just today, but for tomorrow and for years down the road. Making sure that we're focusing on opportunities for kids and our staff, and trying to create an environment where those opportunities can be as similar as possible to provide those equitable experiences, whether they're for our staff or our teachers, for our families, regardless of where their child goes to school. That's an important piece that our team focuses on, and obviously making sure we're reflecting the values and needs of this community. We're very fortunate to have a large number of administrators and obviously our entire board who sends their own children, or did send their children to the school district. So I do think that we're in tune with the needs of the community and the values that exist within our schools. So again, just a little bit of a history here. We've been working on this project for some time. Started with an analysis of our site, our physical plant. We reviewed how we're doing as an organization with our mechanicals and our facilities. The board authorized that study roughly 6 years ago. It's hard to believe, 5.5 years ago now. Lots of different options, lots of different things that came before this board. Obviously, we had a pandemic. We had a lot of things that were thrown at us, which required us to shift. And shift we did. And continue to go back to the drawing board to make sure that we could achieve the goals that we had identified. While we've been doing that, we've also been analyzing data, and I'm going to talk to you about the data that we've been pulling in, which leads us to today. Just want to reference a website that exists on our district website. It's linked here, as well as just by going out to our district page, which kind of archives all of this work that's moving forward. So the presentation tonight is really going to just simply provide our recommendation regarding Phase 2, which will address the enrollment increase that we're experiencing, the overcrowding at our elementary schools, all 5 of them. It also addresses the need for a renovation at Southern Middle School to provide that educational experience that we were talking about for all kids. So we're going to have to look at enrollment data again and just kind of talk a little bit about where we've come from. The green here represents us as a school district and the kids that we serve. When we start to get into the colored bars on the right, we're looking specifically at this demographer that we've talked about over the years. Their company is called Decision Insight. It's owned by Power Schools, so sometimes we interchange those two terms, but it is the same company. So they've partnered with us on 3 different occasions to analyze trends, to look at census data, to look at construction dwellings in our school district, working with municipalities to try to get a good handle on how our patterns are shifting. They present the data in 2 different ways. One is conservative. That's represented here in the yellowish, I'll go with yellow. It goes with a yellow bar. They also present it in a moderate. Those are their terms, and that is the more aggressive of the 2 predictions. We then develop just simply a line of best fit, or for this presentation, we will call that an average, which is just simply an average of those 2 pieces. So the trends here that we're looking for, we're not looking for 1 year, we're not looking for 1 year where we go up and 1 year where we go down, but we're really trying to generate trends. So going back to 2019, we're showing 10 years here, 4 years in the past, 6 in the future. 23 being this upcoming school year, going from 6,220 kids, somewhere between 6,419 and 6,685. We've talked about this before. This is not normal. This is not what other school districts in the Commonwealth are experiencing, and it's definitely not what school districts in Berks County are experiencing. So this is a challenge, albeit a great one, to have kids that want to come to our school and families that want to send their kids to Wilson, but it's definitely a challenge that we need to tackle. So we also then, for the purpose of this presentation, pulled in another data source. And now we're representing the Decision Insight Average, and that's what we'll be using on the next couple slides here, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Education's prediction. And you see that there's, I wouldn't call that hugely statistically significant, but we are talking 218 kids roughly. So when you break that down into our separate schools, that's definitely something we need to keep our eyes on. Obviously, if a large number of those kids end up at Southern Middle School versus West, it kind of depends on where they go. So you see, again, these trend lines are going up. PDE's averages in this particular slide, total district enrollment we're looking at, is pretty steep, right? It's a number we need to plan for, and quite frankly, we need to take action for soon. So then we look at this slide. We're going to break down where we are in our different grade bands. And for, again, the purpose of this slide deck, we looked at the grade bands we currently have. This is our K-5 enrollment, again, overlaying PDE and Decision Insight. Interesting that the elementary projections are not really trending as high as they were previously when we looked at this data. For those of you that really got immersed in our enrollment trends, you see a little bit of a stabilization, I think, in the slope of that line for elementary, although it's still growing, and our elementary schools are currently all over capacity. We then look at our 6 to 8 projections. This is our middle level buildings at our 2 middle schools. And you see that we're relatively stable there when you look at the Decision Insight averages, but we're showing an increase when we look at PDE. It's interesting that when you look at 2028, 6 years out, we're actually projected to be at the exact same number of students that we are today. But again, PDE average is higher, and we are using the average line with Decision Insight, being mindful of the fact that we have hundreds and hundreds of dwellings that are being constructed as we sit here. 9 through 12. Again, this is our high school center. This is where all of our kids come. I just actually looked at the enrollment as Sean was gearing up for his presentation. We have just crested 2,100 students, 2,106 kids as of today in our high school. That is a very large building. So you can see that we're moving and already exceeding the number of kids that we're projected to have based on the Decision Insight data. So we're seeing a lot of mobility. We're seeing a lot of families moving into the organization, into our communities. But again, this is our enrollment projection data. It's not an exact science. I just want to kind of reinforce that quickly. These are people's best judgment call type of predictions using all those data sources that we have. Things like the pandemic, things like birth rate shifting, obviously that has a major impact on the projections, and we see that reflected here. If I could overlay some of the other data, we were projected to go higher when we came before this community and before the board last time. So a little bit of a summary regarding where we are with enrollment and capacity. We are continuing to increase, albeit not at the same rate in the elementary and the middle schools that was previously predicted. We are currently above functional capacity in all of our elementary schools, and I think this is a really critical piece for everyone to understand. Building a school we're adding on to schools today is needed just to alleviate the pressures that we're feeling. So even without enrollment expansion, there's still a need for space in our buildings. Currently, that functional capacity is factored in around 500 students. The needs of the learners in our school communities are changing. We're seeing the need to do some programmatic shifts to ensure that we can meet the needs of children. And specifically, there are some groups of learners that we have here. For example, students that are developing the English language need additional supports that a English proficient student may not need. They need place for program. They need place to have these learning experiences with teachers and other small group instruction spaces that perhaps 20 years ago when these schools were built wasn't a need in our community. So we need to look at the current needs of our school system and our kids as opposed to the needs that existed back in the 90s or early 2000s when many of our schools were constructed. We also spend a lot of time looking at our district. And hopefully you remember seeing this image as well. This is an overlay of our community. The different colors represent the elementary boundary lines, where our elementary schools serve. You can see the elementary schools have little icons with flags on the top. And the pink dots are kids. Those are students that attend these schools. The areas in black represent areas that are currently being developed or will be developed. I can say with confidence, looking at these black spaces, I believe with the exception of this little square right here, all of them are currently being under construction. Earth has moved, land development work has occurred, and in many cases, there are kids living in those houses. This little square right here, although it seems very small, is mighty. It's going to be a very large complex full of a lot of apartments. So you can't just look at the size of the square and identify that as being a small space. So we continue to look at this, and we continue to look at the density of where those dots are, as well as how they're spread out throughout our different 5 buildings. So some analysis that we've done, and basically a further review, is this trajectory has stabilized beyond our previous projections, which results in slightly a less need moving forward to attain our goals. We also looked at building onto the current elementary schools, and we're going to talk a lot about this in a couple upcoming slides, but about how that may or may not be the right decision for this board to take on. We looked more deeply at property that we own. We own currently the Lincoln Park site. It's the site of the old Lincoln Park Elementary School. And through work with our architects and engineers and our team here, we have determined that we can build an elementary school on that site. Whereas previously, we weren't sure that that was a viable option. Albeit currently, and I'll get into this in more depth, that elementary school may need to be capped at 3 sections per grade. The due diligence process that we've been through with looking at another site, a possible school site, has unveiled some other challenges for us that we previously didn't consider. And I'm going to talk through some of those as well. And the last thing I think is a newer piece for me to address is that we're really looking 5 to 7 years out of this enrollment data. The first time we went through this, we looked more towards the 10-year data point, and it's just so hard to project. It's so hard to predict in this world we live in, where we're going to be in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years is really it's just confusing. So we really hunkered down. The demographers we worked with, even Pennsylvania Department of Education, has a huge disclaimer: do not go beyond 5 years. So we're looking really that 5 to 7 years out. When I presented to you today was 6 years. So some considerations and processes that we used to arrive at our recommendation. So this is the one location that we were looking at. We actually made a recommendation to the board in February of last year to build an elementary school. This is where we were considering building that school. So for this exercise, what I did is I took a circle and I just drew from the center of that property 1.5 miles out and created this circle, and I overlaid students that are currently in kindergarten through grade 5. This is the demographer tool that we partner with. And I chose 1.5 miles intentionally because that's actually the radius that we would consider in this type of a building to have students, they would qualify as walkers. Not saying that every kid would walk, but just hypothetically in a utopia, if every kid could, how many kids potentially could walk to the school? And this was interesting to me. I never did this, I never considered it. It came up with 141 kids who currently are in grades K to 5. Lots of challenges also with this site regarding walkability, but we'll address that in a moment. Here's the Lincoln Park site, the other site that we own. Did the same exercise, drew out from the center of Lincoln Park, and realized that it's just a little over 1,000 students. So again, in a perfect world, nearly all of the students, or most of the students, could potentially walk, assuming everything else was perfect. And we know it's not perfect, and there's a lot of work that our transportation team, led by Mr. Williams, would have to lead on this. But you can see that we're nearly 8 times or 9 times more students living in this general region. So that's your Lincoln Park property. Some other considerations we looked at with the State Hill property: cost, transportation, and some considerations regarding can we actually build on the site as we initially had planned. We also looked at some other things. So we looked at this idea of building a new middle school. We said, there's needs all across the organization. We have needs all the way through K to 8, really, and all the way into the high school for that matter. So we looked at this idea, like, what if we would create another middle-level experience for students out maybe on the southern side of Spring Township, out where there is a lot of land and currently not a lot of students. And we started to identify that there were some barriers to us bringing that forth as a sound recommendation to our board. Land acquisition and development, obviously a lot of work would have to be put into that. We don't have land. We're not aware of the land that would be suitable for a school of this size. Very costly to build a school of this magnitude. I mean, you're looking at a very large school, housing, I would say we'd probably build this school for 700, 800, maybe even 900 students. All of the facilities that go with a middle-level building. Having 3 middle levels feed 1 high school, again, just a lot of challenges that we looked at. We would need increased time to fund this and to construct it. We've been building in money in the budget for the last few years, which we're going to touch on with Christine, but it would take us more time. We couldn't, quite frankly, do this with a deliverable date that we have. We also realized that our projections don't warrant this. We don't currently have a need for this much space in our organization, and that would not be a good use of our resources, our money, our human resources to recommend something like that. And then the last piece of consideration was transportation, possibly likely a need for a 3-tiered model, which would really disrupt the way our families are used to being transported within the Wilson School District. Again, going back to those values of our community, we would need about an hour and a half in between start of one run and end of the third, which we just don't feel right now is something that this community would be interested in discussing. We also considered adding on to our current elementary schools. We've talked about this multiple times in public. So a lot of work was done here. Again, I want to thank our architects for partnering with us on this. Reminder that those schools were originally built, in most cases, for 400 or less students. We built onto all of them. We've added classrooms, at least 6 classrooms to all those schools. However, we did not do anything to address all of the other issues that go on to adding more kids: parking, common spaces, cafeteria, kitchens, offices, small group instruction spaces, playgrounds. They're all pretty much the way that they were when they were built. We also realized that it's more costly to do it that way, and I will show you a slide that speaks to that. It's not programmatically appropriate to have elementary schools in our leadership team's recommendation, including our principals, to have elementary schools with 725 kids. That's a large school, and it gets programmatically not advisable when you have that many young learners in that space. And I already talked about the common areas, parking, flow of traffic, would all be over capacity. Not easy to change with an addition. So I highlighted some of these pieces here about, why would we not be recommending today this idea. I'm not going to go into each one of those in depth. I think I covered them pretty well. There would also be some staffing needs, just adding teachers and adding square footage. There's operational costs. There's staffing costs that are outside of the classroom, which are listed in this slide deck. We'd have to make sure our kitchens are equipped to feed 700 kids as opposed to how they were designed to feed 400. Lots of things we'd have to consider to make sure that we can deliver the program that our families are used to receiving here at Wilson. Scheduling would be a challenge as well. Navigating the schedule with one specialist in health and physical education and one specialist in discovery and other specialists would be very difficult to service that many kids and to service them to our standard. And then, like I said, the cost of doing so actually exceeds the cost of building a new elementary school. So here's a rendering that the team from Sean did for us a little while back, and it looks at what it would look like if we would build onto an elementary school. And I admit, early on in this process, I'm like, oh, it's not really that challenging. You build 6 classrooms. And I think a lot of us were kind of down that same train of thought until you actually sit down and look at it. 6 classrooms could be 145 kids, right? It's a lot of kids that you're infusing into this school. So you need classroom spaces. You need to have toilet spaces, obviously restrooms for the students. You need to have separate mechanical spaces to make sure you can properly heat and air condition the space. Stairs, corridors, hallways. We also then looked at some of these spaces. We know we can't fit kids in our cafeteria. We already run a hybrid 6-period lunch. We can't add more kids. So what we determined is that we have to expand our cafeteria, possibly look to do some things within our kitchen, and actually build a whole new gymnasium, because those spaces would fall into the current gymnasium space. So basically, what these slides represent is that we are not recommending building onto our elementary schools, not all of which can be built onto, because among many other factors, we believe that it's not fiscally responsible because it would cost more money to get the same number of seats as building a new elementary school. So that basically brings me to our recommendation. Our recommendation for the board and for the community to consider is to build a new 3-section per grade elementary school on the Lincoln Park site, which would create 6 elementary schools in our school district. In addition to that, we're proposing a comprehensive renovation and the construction of roughly 12 additional classrooms off the back of Southern Middle School. Included in that construction will be a new secure entryway and state-of-the-art science labs to create those equitable experiences from our science programming that we've talked about and looked at through pictures previously. Some additional benefits of these recommendations is it allows for future growth within the district. It allows for the possibility down the road of additional pre-K classrooms. If the board would decide we want to move forward with a pre-K classroom in every school to meet the needs of our most needy pre-K learners, we potentially could do that. It eliminates the need to split Spring Ridge Elementary School. Right now, what happens is some of our students who are in grade 5 go to Southern, and some of our students who are in grade 5 go to West. And that is a point of conversation. Actually, our Spring Ridge principal is here with us tonight. Thank you for that. Where I know is a challenge, not only for her, but for us and for those kids who are being separated from their friends. It's just not ideal. It works, we've done it, but it's not what we would recommend moving forward. What this would do for us is basically take that pressure and hit that pressure release valve on our other elementary schools. Assuming we would hit the target of opening this school in August of 2026, what we believe, based on the projected enrollment, is that Lincoln Park would open with approximately 350 kids, approximately. We believe that the other schools that we have, the other 5 elementary schools, would be roughly 500 students. Currently, there is not an elementary school at 500, and we've had elementary schools peak the 600 mark just this past year. So they would feel an immediate pressure release. Kids would feel the room to spread out. Teachers would have a little bit of less congregation, less class size challenges that we have. It allows us really to schedule based on what's best for kids. Last bullet point on here is enables the district to create this equitable middle school experience so that all students, all of our students, will have the academic programming that's afforded to any other 6th grader, 7th grader, 8th grader, regardless of where they go to school. I've presented on this before, how there are gaps in the physical plant between these 2 schools. Albeit the bones of Southern Middle School are fantastic, the classrooms are big, most of the carpet and casework is in good shape. This really allows us to get in there and do a comprehensive reno to make sure every kid and family member is proud to go to Wilson Southern Middle School. So a little bit of proof of concept, what could be, again, very conceptual. This is what the Lincoln Park site could look like. Again, we're not in the design process yet, but the team of engineers and architects have spent some time working with us on some of our needs. So this just basically shows the site. And for those of you that are familiar with the site, you can probably picture the old elementary school that was there. You can see automatically one of the things I noticed was just how much parking there was comparatively to the old Lincoln Park area. You see a separate area for bus drop-offs. You see the footprint of the building. You see a footprint of play area. And then you see a lot of wooded area down here, which would likely need to be used for stormwater retention. So not so much for construction, but areas that we would need on the site to allow us to construct such a site, or such a building. So I'm presenting today, super preliminarily, this approximate estimate, and it's a large range because right now we're comfortable saying that we feel we can build a 3-classroom per grade building. Through the conceptual design phase, if the board would so grant us to move forward at an upcoming board meeting, we would try to continue to work with the engineers and the architects to see if there's any capacity to make this school a 4-class per grade site, which would make it the same as our other schools. But again, we're presenting that as a range to you this evening of a $29 to $35 million construction cost. That's all in, again, using Sean's image before bid day, as well as the soft costs that go into that. Here's an overlay of Southern Middle School, and we have spent some time in this site, again, with our team, including from Crabtree, Rorbach and Associates, analyzing every room, every hallway, stairwell, making sure that this estimate is as close as we can get it at this stage of the game. So real quickly, blue is new construction. What could be off the back of what I'll refer to as the new section of Wilson Southern. This is the 8th grade hallway going back towards the tennis courts and our transportation department. You'll see the classrooms and the way that they've been able to work them into the site. You'll see that anything in this color here, maybe like a salmon color, that is pretty heavy construction. This is currently the office space, the counselor suite. This is what we call the Learning Commons. That's the old locker area at Southern Middle School, if anyone went to Southern or had kids there prior to last year. And then you'll see some major renovation over here, which is essentially some office spaces, as well as some of our key corridor areas that were just identified by our team as having too much congregation, too many kids in a very tight space. You'll see a second floor overlay as well. Again, the same colors exist. And then orange represents moderate renovation. Yellow represents, I believe that's yellow, represents light renovation. And then this entire building includes a brand-new systems, HVAC system install. So that would be everywhere throughout the building. It's represented in green, if that's the only thing that is currently within the scope of work in this estimate. A couple other things that you see is a nice entryway over here. This is currently where most of our families enter the auditorium, whether they're coming from Cornwall Terrace or they're coming from Southern Middle School to any type of a performance, event, or ceremony. So recommending to do a nice facade update there to make sure that that's a nice entryway for our families and our kids. Also looking to add on to the front of the school to do a nice secure entryway, moving some of this office space out here, and then some type of really distinguishing feature here is some of the preliminary conversations for Wilson Southern. What will set this school apart and make it unique, perhaps from some other schools? So the scope of work here is a larger price tag, somewhere between $39 and $44 million is our current approximate costs. Obviously, things are all in flux right now with the cost of products and availability of goods, but we do feel strong about that number, presenting that number to you this evening. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Schlossman to talk through the costs and the funding models.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Good evening, everyone. So this is a summary of what we just saw related to the cost range for the Lincoln Park Site Elementary School proposal, as well as the Southern Middle School renovations and addition. So that totals $68 to $79 million. However, we do have some excess funds from our 2021C general obligation bond, which was part of the original Phase 1 construction financing. So that's a range between $14 and $15 million that we can apply to Phase 2. So that would, estimated additional funding calculation would be $53 to $65 million. So just a summary of our current existing debt for Wilson School District. We currently have $100.3 million in outstanding bonds and notes with final maturity in fiscal year 2033. Our annual debt service payments are $10.9 million, and our additional borrowing capacity is currently at $160.8 million. So based on what we had just seen, the estimated additional funding needed for construction costs for Phase 2 would be an amount of not to exceed $65 million. Based on that, we consulted with our financing team, and that is a projected 11 additional years of debt service while we can maintain our current run rates with no additional millage impact due to some wraparound financing, which we'll hear about in a second. And we can maintain our favorable AA debt rating with the additional debt issuance. So now I'd like to turn it over to our financing consultants, Scott Kramer and Ally Mackey from Raymond James, and Michael Vind from FSL Public Finance.
Good evening. Whenever we follow the architect's presentation, I'll often wonder why we can't have a flyover of our presentation. I would love a flyover, just can't do it. So we're going to talk about the financial side of the project. My part of the presentation is to give you a little bit of flavor for the current interest rate environment that we're in at the moment. This chart shows you the historical, what's called the MMD, which is the municipal yield curve, and how your bonds would be issued in the marketplace. The light blue vertical lines across the page are the highs and lows going back to 1993. You can see that the dark blue and the red line in the middle of the page represent the average interest rate curve and also where the interest rates are today with the red line. You can see we're about in the middle or the average of where it's been going back to 1993. The one point I would make with respect to the red line is that you can see with the early part of the yield curve, the first 5 years, are what we call inverted, meaning that the yields on the first 5 years of the curve are higher than the belly of the curve and in some places the longer part of the yield curve. That's a function of what's happened with, you've been all watching the news, the Federal Reserve raising rates pretty significantly over the past 2 years. I think the consensus is we're finished with the rate hikes, maybe one more at the end of this year, depending on some of the economic numbers that we see coming forward. The next slide is history, again, going back to 1990. You can see that the general trend has been lower with the bottom early part of January 2020. During the pandemic, we've had a pretty significant rise with respect to rates, but again, historically speaking, fairly low over the last 30 to 40 years. One thing I would point out here is the district has taken advantage of refinancing opportunities along the way and issued the first series of bonds for your Performing Arts Center, literally at the bottom of the market. I think when I was here last, the yield on that issue was 1.5% of the issue that first $40 million at. So that's a pretty attractive rate for a large part of the existing debt. Again, by way of refresher, this is the district's existing summary of debt. You can see in columns 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those are the previous issues. A lot of that was refinancings along the way, as I mentioned. The key takeaway here is your existing debt, before we do anything, runs out to 2033. If you look at the far right-hand column, column 10. And as Christine mentioned, the annual run rate or the amount that's in your budget currently for debt service is level at about $10.9 million per year. Out there in 2033, it drops from 10.9 down to $2.2 million. The other thing I would note on this page is column 9 is the debt service for that first $40 million that we issued back in 2021 at the bottom of the market. And so had we not started phase 1 and the financing, your debt would have only run out 6 more years. And so the message here, and I think I've delivered this message many times before, is this is a very unusual debt profile relative to your peers, a district of this size, and we're going to talk about that in a later slide. This slide and this existing debt portfolio is one of the reasons why you carry the AA rating from S&P, but it also allows you a great deal of flexibility in considering the options that we're going to talk about here in a second for financing these projects. The wraparound structure that Christine referenced compared to 20, 25, and 30 years, like your home mortgage, much more efficient vehicle, and that also allows us, with a little bit of restructuring, to minimize the impact, in fact, reduce the impact to zero and keep that run rate for debt service at $10.9 million. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk about the financing plan, and then Ally's going to follow that up with the Moody's rating report.
Good evening. As Scott mentioned, we used $65 million as the high-end target, as Christine had gone through in her presentation, just to show you what this would look like given today's rates with actually the current rates plus 25 basis points. So we gave a little bit of a buffer in there, and what that would look at and look like from a run rate perspective. Instead of just doing, as Scott mentioned, 25 or 30-year level debt service, like a traditional home mortgage, that would add significant annual cost to the current debt structure. So what we did was we restructured some existing debt, layered on then the $65 million, again, the high range of that project, and you can see after that, after this is all done, column 7, we're staying at that $10.9 million run rate. So we wanted to have as least budget impact as possible, and what this would look like, and we're going out an additional 11 years to 2044. So that $65 million plus a restructuring would go out to 2044 and add just an 11-year for this entire package. As Christine mentioned earlier, the borrowing capacity is a little over $160 million. The restructuring of $27 million of debt, again, that would provide room to allow us to keep at that $10.9 million run rate. That total cost is $2.3 million over the life. So the net present value cost of that restructuring and then moving the principal around is going to cost approximately $2.3 million. The cost of money is extremely high. You can earn a lot more on your funds. So if you were going to issue, we did not, and you can earn about 5% right now in today's market, we did not take that into account in that $2.3 million. So that's just the cost, and anything that you earn on those funds while they're waiting to be deployed for construction would lower that impact of that $2.3 million. Again, 11 years with all the debt being ended in 2044. And then in this box, or in this table, what we did was we ran the wraparound, which debt service package that we have been talking about, plus 20 years, 25 and 30-year level debt service, so you can see the impact of that. It would add about $2.985 million with the wraparound debt service. However, we are going to do the restructuring, so that number is going to be reduced to zero. If you just did 20-year level debt service, that would add an additional $4.7 million to that $10.9 million run rate. 25 would be $4.3 million, and 30 years would be about $4 million. The average all-in true interest cost, you can see in the bottom, also the total principal and interest. And from budgetary impact, we feel that this is the most cost-effective model to fund something of this size. And with that, I'm going to let Ally go through the credit rating discussion.
Okay, so I think one of the questions the administration posed to us was, how do we know if we undertake a project of this size that we're going to come out the other end of this as financially stable as we are today? So we tried to put together an idea of what the rating agencies look at, because that really kind of gives you an idea. That's what investors look to when they go to buy your bonds. What does Moody's say your rating is? What does S&P say your rating is? As a benchmark, really, for how fiscally sound the plan is and the administrative end of things are. So Wilson is currently rated AA stable by Standard & Poor's. The last time you guys went through the rating process was in conjunction with those 2021 C bonds back in May of 2021. You'll look to the table at the right there. We put all of your Berks County peers on that table so you could see how your rating stacks up against all the other districts in the county. You have the highest rating, along with Exeter and Muhlenberg, who are rated the same as you are. And then you'll see the other schools in the district underneath who are lower rated than you at AA-, A+, and Baa2. Statewide, the district's one of only 30 PA school districts that are in the AA rating category by S&P, and one of 85 districts in the AA category as a whole, so a AA+, AA, or AA-. So it's an incredibly strong rating. If you look down below, that's the full rating criteria for each rating agency in terms of how the scale works. You might have heard on the news last week that Fitch downgraded the U.S. credit rating to AA+ from AAA. So they're now one rating above Wilson School District. So that, is something to be proud of. You're one notch below the federal government. We went back to your rating report from May of 2021, and we just wanted to note a couple of the things that they noted, which are credit strengths, which is your stable local economy here. You have strong incomes and a strong tax base, and you have strong operations and a strong reserve position. For the rating agencies, cash is king. They always want to see you have cash on hand. Spending down fund balance or reserves is an automatic red flag to them or a negative when you go through this financing process. So not that you can't use cash for things, but if you're going to undertake something like this, we always say keep it till the end and downsize your final borrowing because they'll want to see that you have that until the plan is complete. The credit challenges, honestly, challenges of all school districts in the state of Pennsylvania, elevated pension and OPEB costs. And then they note things that could potentially lead to the district being upgraded, which is that your reserves or economic metrics improve relative to the AA plus rated peers, or a lower debt burden. And factors that could lead to a downgrade would be the operations becoming unbalanced, any budgetary performance that was negative or causing fund balance to fall below the levels that they consider to be very strong. So the main takeaway, again, is that when we want to add some significant leverage, like we're talking about here, that will pressure that rating, we want to keep our cash balances and reserves strong because we want to maintain that higher grade rating. The higher rating, the lower your interest cost. So, if you're going to borrow for something like this, you want the lowest interest cost you can potentially receive. So we wanted to show you kind of how the rating agency is going to look at you based on the financials and the potential $65 million of additional leverage. You are rated by S&P. We're going to show you the Moody's methodology. The reason is they're much more transparent about how they rate you and how the scorecard works. I think Mike and Scott would say we've been through thousands of rating calls, both with S&P and Moody's, and it is exceedingly rare to see a difference between the two. So as an indication, Moody's should still give you the same indication as S&P would give you, even though we're showing you Moody's and you're rated by S&P. So this is the Moody's scorecard factors. You can see there's 4 components to this: the economy, the leverage, the financial performance, and the institutional framework. Only 2 of these 4 bubbles can be controlled by the district. You can't control the economy, so you can't control your resident income, your full value per capita, or your enrollment trends, which make up 30% of your rating. And you can't factor the institutional framework. That's just a high-level, state-mandated metric that Moody's assigns an A rating to for the state of Pennsylvania for all districts. So you can't control that to 10% either. So there's 40% of your rating that you can't necessarily control. So the 2 things you can control are the long-term liabilities ratio and the fixed cost ratios under leverage, which makes up 30% of the rating, and then your available fund balance ratio and your net cash ratio, which is the other 30% of your rating. So that 60% you can control by how much leverage you put on and how much cash you have in the bank and things that you potentially can control better than the other 40%. Now that was the above the line part that is based on data. This is the notching factors, so they always reserve the right to notch the district's rating up or down based on these other items. Really the only one we ever see them use, probably for school districts in Pennsylvania, is potential or significant change in leverage. I mean, have you guys ever seen any of the other ones be used? So they're more for other entities that they rate, but that is a significant part of the story, because when we go to the rating agencies, and we're on the phone with Christine and the folks at your administration, they want us to tell them a good story, and they want a plan. They want to know that this is how we're going to do it, and that at the end, we're going to do what we said we were going to do. And the more they buy into that, the less this becomes a factor to the rating. So we went ahead and we took your fiscal year 2022 financial statements. We dropped them into Moody's scorecard to get the data-driven part of this. Again, they could notch it up or down depending on however they view things. But for the data part of this, you'll see that once we put in your economy, financial performance, and leverage information, the blue box there at the bottom, you come out with a 3.3, which is equivalent to a AA2 rating. That is directly the equivalent of a AA rating from Standard & Poor's, which is what you're currently rated. Then we wanted to add that additional $65 million of leverage and see how much pressure that puts on the rating. So you'll see where the red arrows are there, that increasing the leverage by $65 million increases your long-term liabilities ratio, dropping you from the AA3 category in that one line item to the A1 category. And then the fixed cost ratio, actually, you're just over the edge there at 14.6. The next level down to AA plus would be at 15%. So when you factor all that together, your issuer rating slides to a 3.5, which is at the bottom of the band there to the right that I've circled, but you are still in the AA category. And the thing we haven't accounted for here is we've just assumed that you keep the cash you have today on hand. So you'll see those financial performance ratios are exactly the same between the two. But in reality, it's likely with what you're earning on cash just from your investments and things like that, and adding to fund balance, that side of the house will actually improve versus the leverage, going the other direction. So we feel very good about the plan, and if the plan is executed the way it's laid out, that the rating agencies would not potentially downgrade the district out of the AA rating that you currently hold just based on the $65 million worth of leverage. And again, that's just a kudos to the administration and the board and what you all have done over the last 10, 15 years to get yourself in a position to be able to layer on that amount of leverage and really not tip the scale from a rating perspective.
Right, I think, just a real quick, I think the message there is, Chief, I've said this before, we want you going into this project to come out on the other side as strong as you went in. And so the goal is to put a plan in place that doesn't jeopardize the other things that you want to do around the district, the programs, the level of classroom space, all those things you want to maintain in a positive direction. We don't want the financing plan to jeopardize that or put you into a corner that you can't, frankly, get out of. And so I think what this proves out is that the rating agencies, not just your financing team, is telling you that by adding the additional debt, you've not jeopardized or should not jeopardize all the things that you want to continue to do here at Wilson School District. You're going to be just as strong on the other side. Again, to the superintendent's comment, we can only look 5 to 7 years out. We don't know what lies 7, 10, 15 years out. But if we were back here having a conversation about another project, you certainly would have the ability to do another project down the road. If it came around, you're going to have refinancing opportunities along the way. So again, keeping the financial house in order is very, very important to us. That rating is very, very important to you. And as Ally said, I think the board, the prior boards, this board, this administration, prior administrations have really put you in a place to succeed long-term. The debt profile that I talked about in the first, second, or third slide there is very, very important to your success. And where you're starting from and where you're going to end up is a very strong position.
And then the chart at the bottom is just to show you that, this is a statewide view. We showed you the Berks County view of where your Berks County peers are rated. But on a statewide basis, most issuers are rated A2 and above, which is 4 notches below what you're rated. And so you are considered very highly rated in the K through 12 sector in Pennsylvania as you currently stand today. And then lastly, we just wanted to give you some idea of what your peers are doing. So we looked at a couple of districts that have similar sized budgets to Wilson. We looked at what their current debt service run rates are and their final maturities on their existing debt. And then we kind of just layered in here some of their preliminary estimated future financing plans, things we know they have going on or are considering, so that you can kind of get a taste for their future run rates and final maturities after they would execute a similar financing plan to what Wilson is considering. You'll notice Hempfield is potentially looking at increasing their run rate north of $6 million with a 2047 final maturity, financing $150 million. Manheim Township is doing a similar exercise to what we've shown you here tonight, where they did a restructuring already. They've restructured their debt down to $12 million, but kept the $14 million run rate in their budget. So they're figuring out what can they borrow and use up that $2 million of excess that they currently have because of the restructuring. And Dallastown is looking at $120 million of potential projects, raising their run rate over $3 million, $3.5 million with a 2049 final maturity. And we know Parkland's considering a very large capital project. It looks about, at the moment, maybe $130 million plus, but they already have a $12.7 million run rate for debt service currently that runs to 2036. So just a little bit of information to show you you're not the only ones considering this type of financing or financing plan, and that there are other folks around the state that are doing the exact same thing and figuring out how to fund it similar to how you all are. Anything else? Thank you.
Okay, so that was a summary of the construction cost that we would be taking on with this Phase 2 recommendation. We also want to talk about our annual operating cost projections. And as we had discussed in the last several budgets that we developed since 2021-22's budget, we began the phase-in process, phasing in mills to support the annual operating cost projections of our enrollment growth. So this table shows the elementary and the Southern Middle School enrollment growth that is projected, as we had seen earlier in the presentation, and also the additional costs of opening a new elementary building and also adding on to the Southern Middle School building for that growth. So this table shows on the leftmost side the elementary costs. So we're looking at the organic growth of Wilson School District based on the enrollment is going to cost approximately $1.2 million in staffing. The addition of the actual elementary school, a separate building, will create the need to have other personnel in that building, special student support, special teachers for special programs, and also some non-personnel costs of the operating costs of running the building with utilities and whatnot. So that total enrollment growth plus the new building would total $3.5 million. On the rightmost hand side of the table, we'd look at the middle school that Chris had talked about. And that has to do with our enrollment growth in the middle school area, but also staffing those programs to make it similar to West. And that would be additional staffing, just organically as well. And then with the middle school addition, that would be the operating costs of having that additional square footage. So total all in at this point with our best estimate projection for elementary would be $3.5 million at opening and $0.6 million when we have the Southern Middle School built, that addition and renovations. So you can see that that is in line with what we had projected in our budget process through the years. We were projecting to be at a phase-in of $3.5 million by August of 2026. And the board has also committed fund balance for enrollment growth of $2.5 million currently, with the potential of additional infusion into that committed fund balance when we see the final results of the 2023 audit. So I will now turn it over to Dr. Trickett.
Thank you, Christine. So just a very brief timeline here of some potential next steps. Here we are tonight presenting to the school board and our community regarding our recommendations. We are proposing that we take the next day here to finalize a thought exchange, to push that out on August 9th, sharing this information with the community via a video and some information, and just simply asking them for their thoughts and for them to reflect on what they saw and to give us their feedback. Knowing that we really need to stick in our recommendation professionally to try to get this building open in the summer of 2026. The timeline is somewhat aggressive here, so we are looking to move for a possible board vote as soon as we can, as early as August 21st, perhaps in the first week of September, or first board meeting of September if needed, on Phase 2. And what that will look like is the authorization to proceed with Crabtree, Orbach, and Associates on the conceptual design phase of this elementary school at Lincoln Park, as well as a comprehensive renovation and addition at Southern Middle School. So far, we've been working with them in good faith and really need to solidify an agreement to continue that work. So those are the next steps that we have outlined, and at this point, I'll turn it over to President Cocker to facilitate any conversation that she would like to have.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. Thank you for that presentation and information, especially the financial background was really helpful. Do any of the board members have any questions for Dr. Trickett and his team? Just questions at this point necessarily, or feelings on different aspects of it, or maybe something that you would like more information on that wasn't in the presentation? Mr. Martin.
I have tons of questions. I don't know how many board members have seen this before tonight, but this is overwhelming with all this thrown at us. And to vote in 2 weeks, I'm not sure that's appropriate. I don't know where to begin. I guess we'll begin with the proposal. I have some problems with the philosophy that was used, and I'll explain that. A few years ago, we had Insights do an enrollment report, and it came out, higher than the PDE. And then, of course, the thought was, well, we can't use PDE's numbers because they're too low. Now, in this presentation, we see PDE has higher numbers, and I don't like a situation where you pick and choose. Insight's number, they're paid professionals. They know better than PDE what's happening. And there's a third one I know that we use internally that even has different numbers. So I do have a problem with basing a lot of this on PD information because it seems like we're playing both sides of the coin when sometimes it works for us and sometimes it doesn't work for us. That to me is a concern. The big concern, I'm not, like I said, I know there's overcrowding, but we've overstayed the overcrowding. I think the slide said we have like almost 500 students. I wasn't quite sure what that slide was showing, but those schools originally are built to hold a capacity of 26 to 28 students. We now have this term called functional capacity, which is 85% of capacity. That's not an appropriate measurement. I understand that some of the schools have 25 students, but 24 to 22 is not unheard of. So I hate that term that we're overcrowded. Everything's overcrowded. It's not overcrowded. The schools were built to handle more than that. But we use PDA's term, functional capacity, which I have a problem with because we never build a hotel at 100 rooms and say we can only use 85. You just don't do that. I understand education's quite a different animal. Lincoln Park, I don't think anybody was on the board when the next school was built, but Lincoln Park was reviewed for building a 3-class per grade school there, and it was turned down by the PDE because it was not sufficient acreage to accommodate the needs of the students. The administration at that time, I know things changed a while back, but they supported PDE's recommendations that that school was not fit for 3 class grades, 3 classes per grade. Now that's all flipped over. Now that's acceptable. These are the things that drive me nuts. I mean, we need to look at this closer, and I understand, you can shoehorn anything into anywhere, but back then it was not acceptable, and that was back, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s. So there's a lot of questions I have. What makes it okay now, then it didn't make it okay then? From the financing standpoint, that probably went over most people's heads because I had a difficult trying to understand it because there was so much thrown at us. You talk about wraparound financing. Why do we have to do that? Why would we do a wraparound financing for debt we have out that's at a lower interest rate? Is it to protect the 10.9% run rate? If that's the case, that's not a good reason for it. I don't know. Should I continue? I don't know if I should continue that because I have a lot here.
If you have any questions, I think this is a good time to share
Well,
with Dr. Trickett.
I think what I need to know, I need a copy of everything that was sent out tonight. I would like to have seen that finance information earlier. I mean, like I said, I don't know if the other board members seen this stuff, but I haven't. And I understand finances. and I had a rough time keeping up with how the stuff was presented, so I'd like to get a copy of that. I think we should have a separate meeting, a workshop meeting for everything that we've just seen, and that's open to the public, because there's a lot more that I need. I have notes here, but I'm losing my train of thought here. And I don't want to say anything that I'm not fully be able to back up. But another stat I just saw, and this, I don't know if this has anything to do with enrollment growth or potential finances, but on August 7th, Reading was the 23rd worst city to live in the United States. I have 1,000 cities. They were 23rd. The poverty rate is 36%. 50% of the people are on food stamps, and the crime rate is significantly higher than any other major cities compared to. So all this stuff, we talk about all this construction. I get construction. That's another comment. I'm sorry. I'm jumping around here. Everything that's been approved by the township doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be built. So I think, Chris, you mentioned that all these that have been approved are under construction. I think we need to just formalize that in a better manner, because back when we did this process in 2011, we had all these things being going on, and half of them didn't make it to fruition. In addition, the final thing I want to say is that we never really discussed about class size. Class size really focuses on what you build and what you don't build. What is an acceptable class size? We never nailed that down. What is it? Because a school can have, a class size of 28 and function, or you can have a school class size of 20. I don't know what that is, but there's a lot of things here that I think we need to have a much more detailed meeting on. Thank you.
Dr. Trickett, do you want to just record that and answer in time? Or
Yeah,
do you
sure.
wanna-
It just, I did take quite a bit of notes here. I think it might be best if I just kind of hear some of the concerns. I can speak to some of those pieces, but maybe if there's some themes that emerge from the board, I'll do my best with our team to address them now, and then obviously follow up as needed.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions to Dr. Trickett's team from the board?
Yeah, Mike, I agree with you. It is a lot to digest. Dr. Trickett, could you go to the last slide just with regard to the thought exchange and public comment? I mean, that August 9th, are you talking about some sort of a large forum in an auditorium where we actually have public comment, or are you talking, it is a lot, especially if the ask is to vote on something for August 21st. I'd really like to see the public's opinion on appetite for this, and me personally. I'm sure we all do before we go into, something, this size.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Case. Other questions from the board members? Dr. Kennedy?
I just want to confirm that if I got a Harry Potter or maybe Hermione wand, because she's better with spells, and I built us a Schoolio tomorrow and it appeared on Lincoln Park, we could basically fill that school tomorrow because our other schools are so overcrowded. So I just want to reiterate that. The children are here now. They're in our buildings. They're in portable classrooms at Whitfield Elementary. And that is not an appropriate learning environment for our students. As far as developments, I'm in a bit of a cranky place at this right now. I live on Gall Road. My road has been under construction all summer. I have not been able to drive down to my road. When I bought my house on Gall Road 18 years ago, I lived in the middle of farmland. Farmland. Now there are apartment buildings being built at the bottom of Gall Road behind the barbecue pit. There's apartment buildings, there's an entire Green Valley West, there's the new Green Valley that's going across from Green Valley, there's the, expensive Green Valley houses on the curve by the corner. Hundreds of new houses within 1.4 miles of my house. Not to mention when I ride up Paper Mill Road, and I know they're developing on both sides of that. The apartments behind that were supposed to be for Penn State Berks, that are definitely not just for Penn State Berks, off of Paper Mill on the way to the covered bridge. I never in a million years thought that they would build at the old quarry. We have hundreds of houses going in right behind the development that people were sold at. I have friends that live there, and they said, you'll always live behind open land because you can't develop on the quarry. Well, if you drive down, what's the name of it, the road? Schweitzer, yeah, in Prendergast. I mean, they're not even close to being finished with that development. So I don't want to hear that that no one's coming, because they're here, they've been here. This has been far too long. This has been way too long in the making. I'm proud of this administration for coming up with such a concise recommendation. I appreciate that. And if you want to know how the community feels, I'd go back about 10 years ago and watch the school board meetings when they closed Lincoln Park and West Wyomissing. You will find out how those communities felt about losing their schools. So I want to say thank you. I've been in support of this since I've been on the board, and it's about time. Thank you.
Mr. Negrini?
Just very briefly, you know, I think it is also important for this board to recognize timing of decisions of this magnitude so close to the election in November. We have the possibility of 5 new board members sitting in this room. Again, I'm not suggesting in any way how any of the potential candidates feel about borrowing more money or directions of this district, but it is certainly a consideration that needs to be taken into our decisions, and as to Mr. Case's point, to understand the community's support for additional borrowing of this magnitude. And again, you know, I appreciate Dr. Kennedy's comments about the concerns of the community in Lincoln Park and West Wyomissing when myself and Mr. Martin were on the board and voted to close those particular buildings. But it was a financial decision as well that drove the decision to either renovate buildings that were certainly significantly older than the current buildings that we had at the time, but how that may impact future budgets, borrowing of money, and the savings that we were able to accumulate over time at our buildings that were in place at the time allowed for those students to join in. So we need to be mindful of the difference between, you know, an emotional reaction and also tempering that with, you know, financial considerations, since that is our role as elected officials to balance those perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. And I would just like to point something out that I would kind of reiterate a question. If when we talk about overcrowding in our schools, are we just saying that the class sizes are getting to be too big? Would it be fixed by just saying, not that this is educationally sound, but saying that we could have a class size of 30 in elementary school and fix that problem? Like, are we just saying that there are too many kids in the classroom, or does that affect other aspects of the building as well when you're taking into consideration that our schools are overcrowded?
Sure. That's a great question, I think it's both, President Cocker. Obviously, class size is a conversation that we're never all going to agree on. I will first and foremost go to what our teachers are telling us, the people that are in the classrooms working with kids every day, followed by our principals and supervisors that are supporting those teachers. Just today, in 2 different conversations I had, including with our PTO chairs, class size came up as a major concern. So it is a focus of the dialogue that we have as administrative leaders here in our school district, because it is growing, because programmatically we're limited on what we can do to solve these challenges. If we had 24 kids, hypothetically, in every single class of every elementary school, we'd have total capacity for 576 kids in each school. That's roughly exactly where we could be in 6 years. That's 24 kids in every class. But what we've learned, obviously, over the years is that it's not just the number of kids, it's based on the type of kids, the needs of the children that need the support in those classrooms. So I think it would be misaligned for us or misinformed for us to go back to what we did 20 years ago or 10 years ago, but more think about what are the needs right now in our school system. So yes, the classrooms, there's no room for children physically, but also in those other spaces we talked about. The office space, the library, the cafeteria, food service, they were not designed to have the number of students, parking spaces. Drop-off, we all have experienced challenges with dropping and picking our kids up. Because schools, the civil engineers that designed the site, they weren't factoring in having 600 or 725 kids in a building. So it's both. It's not just the physical classroom size and the space, it's also the full program and the complement of things that we can offer children. I just want to reiterate on the enrollment growth. We've been having this conversation from my perspective long before I was in the role that I'm in today. Every single year, while we've been having this conversation, we've continued to increase in enrollment approximately 65 students every year for the last 5 years. There was one dip here, obviously, when we went through the pandemic. So they're here. The students we were talking about in 2018 are now here in our classrooms. And I just wanted to reinforce the fact that if we do build a school, if that is the will of the board, this school and all of our schools will not open at full capacity, but they will all be a strong-sized school. They will not be small. There will not be disparate populations that exist. The other thing we need to consider when programming for families, and this is more of a family conversation, we plan for all of these scenarios, but the reality is that every sending region of our school district, when you look at this map, we plan to have 4 sections of grade 4 in Shiloh Hills. We plan to have 4 sections of grade 4 at Green Valley and Cornwall Terrace and Whitfield, but it doesn't work out that way. We have spans right now in our schools based on current enrollment of around 60 kids in one grade to another school that has 125 in the grade. So we need capacity for overload. We need capacity to be agile from year to year. We could be recommending adding additional classrooms literally this week. We need the ability programmatically to do those things because that's what's best for kids. So that's why there is some urgency in trying to get forth a recommendation to build the elementary school and to alleviate that pressure that our kids, our parents, and our teachers are feeling. But I very much appreciate the feedback so far around all of these different pieces, Mr. Martin, the Lincoln Park site, and making sure that we've done a due diligence analysis there. Conversations around class sizes, looking at the feedback from the community and making sure that our community has voice in this process and what we're going to do moving forward. And then also the ramifications of the possible change of the board. Those are all things that we need to consider as we move forward. Anything else, President Cocker, for our team here? Obviously, you can always provide additional feedback to us at any time, but you have some more down there.
Mr. Martin?
Yes, as Chris was talking, I have some other questions too. I said I have many. Building at Lincoln Park does limit future expansion. You mentioned that if it can be built, 3 classrooms per grade can be built, which is something I still question. There's no expansion, so that you're kind of putting us into a situation where then we have to consider something else down the road. So maybe this might not be the best alternative. And for Amy, she was talking about Lincoln Park. I went through the closing of Lower Heidelberg with my kids. I didn't want that school to be closed. Came to school board meetings, sat down with various folks at that point in time. I can't remember who was on the board. But it was a decision that was made correctly. Both my sons enjoyed Green Valley. They enjoyed that, but the whole thing was about equity. We all talk about equity constantly in this building, and they were closed not only for financial reasons, but they were not up to the standards of Wilson. So I'm really getting kind of annoyed hearing about Lincoln Park. There were reasons for that. We talk about equity, we don't follow through on it sometimes, but those were done for financial and equity purposes, because there was no way to rehab that building without tearing it down, starting over, and we were told we can't do that. So that's all I've got. Thank you.
I would just add, thank you, Mike. I would just add, we've talked about Southern as well with regard to equity, and, I mean, this has been years. So, I mean, I'm 100% backing, what we need to do for Southern, and I think it's long overdue. So I appreciate that being brought up. I think the argument, Mike, is the Lincoln Park Elementary School in your eyes. Do you have any, apprehension about what is laid out here for Southern? And I'm just trying to understand where your thinking is.
Well, I haven't seen, well, once again, I toured that school, I guess last year, and was shown the deficiencies. There are deficiencies there, and we got to correct those. This plan, once again, it was just given to us tonight. I don't know all the pieces, but I'm for equity and improving that. The scope of the work may be different from what I've seen, but once again, this is a lot tonight to digest, and I don't think anybody on this board would saying that Southern doesn't need to be improved. It's just that, where are we at that process? Are we getting a Chevy or are we getting a Cadillac? I don't know. I'd have to go through the information, Ed. I can't tell you that.
And again, I'm just trying to focus the conversation where if we're going to have, debate, I'm thinking it's around the elementary school, not so much Southern. And I could be wrong about that. And again, this is a larger community debate, if you will. The last thing I would add is for Lincoln Park, if at all, if we're going to spend this money and invest in it, if we can at all get clever and figure out 4 classrooms per grade on that lot, if that's possible, let's do that once, so we don't have to be in this situation again, if that is at all possible. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Other questions from the board? Mr. McCray?
Yeah, I would just echo what Mr. Case just said. My concern would be Mike's concern if you were to move forward with Lincoln Park, and we would be somewhat limited there with only 3. I think the ability to have flexibility there and expand if needed down the road, knowing that obviously, our projections for 5 years are what they are. And I agree, nobody knows what we are 10 years now. But if we are going to do anything, the more flexibility we can build in would be what I would be in favor of. A couple other points, and again, I realize we may not have all these tonight, but again, we talked about that term of functional capacity. I don't think it was in this presentation of, what our current functional capacity is in the elementary, and then what we would be at current functional capacity, again, with a 3 or 4 classroom, site at Lincoln Park. If you could provide those numbers to kind of let us understand better, where that flexibility may be. And then going back to the slide you had with Southern there and the overhead shot there. And I'm sure that, some of the things that we would need to do at Southern in terms of HVAC would probably need to be done in a certain time period anyway. Knowing that we're connected right there next to Cornwall, was there any consideration is there any, again, economies of scale that would come into play that if you're going to do an HVAC setup or change to Southern, is there any benefit to incorporating something like that and maybe anything else that we might see projected needs at Southern in the next, again, 3 to 5 years, incorporating that now, to get those economies of scale that might come into play by bidding that out too. If we could get some information on that, that'd be great. And maybe just one more question again for our financial friends there. I didn't see anything in terms of when you would recommend doing the timing of this. Is that within the next several months, or is there a benefit? And you mentioned, obviously, most people think that, we're kind of nearing the end of the rate hike, knowing that we have $14 or $15 million in the play that could get us through some planning stages. Is there consideration of waiting maybe another year and interest rates might even be more favorable at that time?
Yes. Fair question.
You can speak.
We laid out a staged plan of finance that, because interest rates on the reinvestment side are high, we would like to keep you as a small issuer, meaning issuing 15 million or less. So the potential for issuing the first piece of the need at the end of this year, if the timing were to allow for that, and then the balance later next year to potentially pick up rates maybe moving in your favor. We've assumed a conservative current rates plus 25 basis points. I think one of our bullets on the slide was, the what if of rates going up or down, 50 basis points, down 50 basis points, and what that means to the debt service. We certainly want to be mindful of making decisions along the way and staging the financings that take advantage of various
Yeah.
interest rate environments, for sure.
Yeah, that's why if we did some options there in terms of staging, I think it could make more sense. Okay.
Yeah, most of the projects that we're looking at of this size are broken up into component parts to help build in the adequate timing for construction. Clearly, you don't need the money up front.
Sure.
You still have some of the money left from the 2021 bond issue. The last time I was here, we were talking about the reinvestment opportunity for those dollars, which will, again, that's not been factored in here, and I think parts is parts. There's a little extra earnings there that we're going to use to offset project costs at the end as well. Just to really quickly answer Mr. Martin's question about debt service, I think there was a slide in our presentation that spoke to how we got to the wraparound structure as the best alternative. Whenever you think about your home mortgage, you go to the bank and say, what can I afford in my annual budget? Is that a 20-year mortgage that has a higher payment, but maybe I save some interest? Or is that a 30-year mortgage that has a little bit lower payment, but I know I'm going to pay more interest over the life? 20, 25, and 30-year options on that summary page come with an impact to the budget of $2, $3, and $4 million, significant impact to the budget. The goal with the wraparound structure was to be mindful of the overall payback, the overall interest component. If you want to get to that slide, I can address it. But the end game was not extending the debt, not paying too much interest over the life, and keeping that run rate at $10.9 million. I know Christine has done a good job of building in, thinking about what the staffing needs and the cost of those staffing needs are going to be for a new building. Those are the anticipated budget things that she's thinking about. On the debt service side, there's no impact to debt service. But that no impact to debt service plan with the wraparound and the restructuring keeps your debt low, in terms of years, lower than any of the alternatives, 20, 25, or 30 years, and also is a very similar payback to those alternatives. So you're not robbing Peter to pay Paul, if you will. It's a sound structure, it's the best structure, and it's the only structure that allows you to keep the millage rate at a static 10.9 million per year. And we're happy to get into those weeds as we go through the planning process as well.
That's the issue. Maybe it makes more sense not to keep the 10.9 mil the same, because we're paying more in the end, because that was the point. It makes sense. If you got to do the analysis, you got to look at increasing that run rate. So you're not losing the interest and you're paying less. That's the point I was trying to make. You just brought it out. I'm not interested in, maintaining that. I'm maintaining what's best for the taxpayers.
And we 100% agree. If you want to keep the run rate at $10.9 million and compare that to the alternative, which is 20, 25, or 30 years, that's one analysis. If you want to look at another that says, we're willing to put additional mills in place for debt service, we certainly can look at that. There is a break point where increasing the run rate is not going to help the payback of interest over the life of the loan.
There's
So we
a
will be
crossover
mindful-
in there.
There's a crossover there, for sure. We're happy to look at what happens if we pick a run rate of $11.5 million. Understanding that requires you to put $600,000 or $700,000 in your budget for debt service. That's a decision for the board to make. And we're happy to look at those alternatives. Nothing that, we presented tonight was set in stone. It was just, can we get there from here? The answer is yes. Can you do it by keeping the run rate at 10.9 million to take the pressure off other areas of the budget? The answer is 100% yes. Are there other ways to skin that cat somewhere in the middle? Absolutely, and we're happy to look at those.
And I would just say thank you, too, for providing the information from the independent rating agencies to kind of show how, Wilson ranks compared to other schools. I think we've always felt we've done a fairly good job in terms of our financial side of our house, and it was nice to have that independently verified by some other agencies, so.
Yeah, I can't take credit. Ally did a lot of hard work there, and we, quite frankly, we've used this presentation, Muhlenberg, other districts that you saw on that page that are going through large projects. You hear about the stress test of the banks on TV. That's essentially what we did.
Sure.
We stress test your budget to say, if you add the new debt, will you come through it on the other side with a favorable rating, being able to do the things you want to do? And the answer to that is yes. So yes, it is an independent,
Yeah.
very transparent approach to school finance.
Yeah, it was just good to hear that independent evaluation as well. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
We
Thank you.
agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, if anyone thinks of anything between now and, I guess, the next week, please forward them to myself and Dr. Trickett, and we'll hear more in the coming weeks. Thank you to everyone for the presentations and the information, especially the financial background. Moving into the regular portion of our meeting, Mr. Moravich, we have public participation on an agenda item.
Pursuant to Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and Board Policy, the following is the rules of public participation. Individuals attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner, does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. In particular, personnel or student matters may not be commented on, even if the employee, parent, or student is speaking because of confidentiality laws. As it relates to questions, the superintendent may assign an administrator or may speak directly to the speaker after the meeting to attempt to answer those questions. The board respectfully requests that you direct your comments to the board as a body, as it's the entire board that will need to vote on future matters. Clapping, calling out, and cheering is not permitted, nor are conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals shall make their comments from the speaker's lectern. Comments are 3 minutes, and I'll try to provide a 1-minute warning that's not disruptive. Any person making threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or cited by local police, and the above expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on board docs embedded within the website.
Thank you, Mr. Moravich. We have Chastity Santiago on agenda item payment of bills.
Short people problems again. Okay, so I'm here tonight because there was a check written by the district in the amount of $31,350 payable to an organization called, I believe I'm pronouncing this correctly, Nusella, on August 8th. $30,000 to an organization with the founder and CEO, Matthew Gross, who has publicly stated the platform was would primarily address critical race theory, but we don't have that here. $30,000 to an organization partnering with providers such as Zinn Education Project, the 1619 Project, and the Southern Poverty Law Center to provide content to our children. $30,000 for access to content containing the following language in an actual piece that all white people play a part in perpetrating systemic racism. Personally, I don't feel that way to anybody in this community. $30,000 to access a platform that includes access to 1,609 pieces of police brutality, which is also, mind you, the first option that comes up for our children to select if you search the word police. 4,710 pieces available on defunding police. 821 pieces available on rampant racism, which is the first option you get if you type the letter R. 3,905 pieces on white supremacy, 3,922 pieces on white guilt, 4,107 pieces on white privilege. This is the heart of this newest, most innovative teaching platform, but don't take my word for it. I've come with some actual reviews by students who have used this platform and been exposed to it. It leans far left. Watching my fellow students eat this stuff up day after day is just sad. It brings up political issues in articles that have nothing to do with politics. It's basically all opinion. Obviously, far left bias. As a middle school student that has been forced to eat this propaganda machine for many years, I can confirm that nearly all these articles are just advertising and encouragement of pro-far left ideas toward young children. Is this our idea of what we really want our new age textbooks that'll teach these students about the world and how it works and determine what kind of citizens they really become? I certainly don't want to pay for it, and I'm hoping all of you will take into account what I just said. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. That's the end of public participation on agenda items. The board did meet in executive session to discuss litigation. On to 2.1, approval of minutes. Request to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on July 17th, 2023. Looking for a motion for 2.1. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to payment of bills, 3.1. Request approval of payment of bills. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Negrini?
That's all right. You can make the motion. Motion to approve the payment of bills from the general fund in the amount of $3,497,490.21 as attached.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Martin?
Yes, obviously, I have not been looking at the bills for some time, but I'm concerned, which was just given to us recently, and I guess I got to ask this to the superintendent. What do we use, or what other sources do we use to offset this type of purchasing of a product that only shows one aspect of an opinion? So what do we use to counter that particular approach so that we have a fair level on both sides?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Martin. So Nozella is basically a provider of written sources that our children can access, teachers can access. What initially attracted us to the platform is that it breaks down articles into different Lexile levels for kids. Specifically, I believe every article is presented in 5 different reading levels, which allows our teachers to differentiate texts for kids to engage them in the classroom through a variety of different resources. So what additional resources? Tons. I mean, there's tons of resources that teachers use. Textbooks, novels, articles, any relevant, articles that are online. We do lit circles and book clubs and current events. There's a variety of different sources that they use. I would need some time with our T&L team to go back and dig into the statements that were made. I have used it personally to read articles, and we've gone through training on this particular tool. So I am familiar with the resource, but I can't confirm or dispute the claims that were made.
And also, so I have a comment, just searching it now, it's, in case any other board members want to type into their browser, it's news, and then ELA, Newsella. They have resources for electives, also ELA, social studies, science, and current events. It's broken down into elementary, middle school, and high school, and I would imagine has a breadth of different topics that teachers can utilize for their classroom. So it is an open resource for different assignments that teachers may assign. I don't know that the representation that was expressed is that this site is solely representative of just one viewpoint. It's articles, which I'm sure you can find that viewpoint in, but I would imagine have products and articles from all different standpoints and backgrounds that have been vetted. Otherwise, it wouldn't be available for education purposes.
Can this be postponed until next meeting till we get more information, the payment of this?
We have partnered with Nozella for many years, and have used it as an instructional resource with our teams for at least 4 or 5 years.
Any other questions from the board? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Trickett.
Thank you, President Cucker. I present items 4.1 through 4.7 as included in my report. Specifically, I would like to welcome David Trout, I believe back there in the back. Thank you for hanging with us for 2 hours. Welcome to Wilson. Looking forward to getting to know you more, and looking forward to you joining the team over at Shallow Hills as a new school counselor. So, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Trickett. So we're looking for a motion to approve superintendent's report items 4.1 through 4.7 as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Martin, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
No.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Ratification to approve field trip, 5.1, request approval to approve the high school girls volleyball team traveling to State College, PA for a tournament on October 6th through the 8th, 2023. No cost to the district, and no days out of school for the students. Looking for a motion for 5.1.
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second?
Martin?
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Under Human Resources, 6.1, request approval of the amended pay rates due to adjusted years of service as attached. 6.2, request approval of the amended job descriptions as attached. 6.3, request approval of the game worker pay increases as attached. 6.4, request to authorize a superintendent to make employment commitments to qualified applicants for the purpose of filling vacancies that occur after the August 7th, 2023 board meeting, with action to be ratified by the school board at the next official meeting. Looking for a motion to approve Human Resources items 6.1 through 6.4.
Hart, so moved.
Mr. Hart, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 7.1, request permission to enroll one foreign exchange student for the 2023-24 school year. 7.2, request permission to renew a service agreement with John Paul II for one special education student at a cost of $46,100 for educational services beginning August 28th, 2023, and ending June 6th, 2024, as presented. 7.3, request approval of a settlement agreement and waiver in lieu of alternative placement for a high school student in the amount of $12,000 per year in tuition for 2 years and $4,000 in attorney fees. Looking for a motion to approve student service items 7.1 through 7.3. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second?
Casper?
Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Martin?
Yes. I was reviewing this, and the update as well is on the agenda tonight. And it's my understanding that the student was accused of theft and refused to comply with our policy number, I think it was 226. Further, it's my understanding that the administration recommended the expulsion of this student.
Mr. Martin, we're not allowed to divulge student information.
I wasn't given student information out.
You just shared about this,
I don't know the student.
you shared information about the student. We're not allowed to divulge
Okay.
student information. Thank you. Any other discussion on student services? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
No.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Technology and Media, 8.1, request permission to purchase 48 firewalls, 1 year of support and installation for CDI LLC using capital funds at a cost of $26,003.58 to the district. Looking for a motion for 8.1.
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second?
Martin?
Mr. Martin, thank you. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 9.1, request permission to renew our annual support service agreement with Kleinzoid, Inc. for water treatment services at all district buildings at a cost of $26,379.72, pending solicitor review. 9.2, request permission to issue a purchase order to R&F Excavating, Inc. for equipment and use of material throughout the district for district playgrounds not to exceed $40,000. Billing is for repairs and replacement, et cetera, on a time and material basis. Looking for a motion to approve operations items 9.1 and 9.2.
So moved, Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Do we have a second? Mr.
Second, Negrini.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Transportation, 10.1, request approval for the retirement through auctions of transportation vehicles. 10.2, request approval to issue a request for bid from Liquid Propane Gas and Maintenance to supply LPG and maintenance for our propane infrastructure from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027, pending solicitor review of the RFB. Looking for a motion to approve transportation items 10.1 and 10.2.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second, Case.
Mr. Case, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Food Cafeteria, 11.1, request approval bid awards for the 2023-24 school year as presented. Looking for a motion for 11.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider, second.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 12.1, request to authorize the school district's chief financial officer the authority to settle a mercantile business privilege tax assessment within certain parameters set by the school board. The board shall ratify such settlement at a subsequent board meeting. Looking for a motion to approve 12.1.
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
And under policies, we have a first reading for changes, a revised policy for 913, non-school organizations, groups, and individuals, and a new policy 913.1, commercial advertising in schools. This is informative, and we will have a second reading and then a subsequent discussion and vote for the third reading. So if anybody has any questions, this is something that was discussed in extracurricular. Please share those questions with myself or Dr. Trickett, and we can provide more information before our second and third readings. Mr. Negrini?
If I may, just only because I recently received a communication relative to Frank Ferraro. We had discussed that in years past. Someone had followed up to see where things currently stood, with our projects and the potential of a naming of the auditorium or a portion of that particular building. So it's kind of appropriate timing that this is going to be discussed with future policies and as we make some potential decisions on votes with the auditorium. So I just wanted to keep that on the forefront about Mr. Ferraro. I shared with this individual. I'm not going to be on the board that much longer, so just want to kind of remind everybody that that has been an interest of lots of community members for a number of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. Moving on to committee reports. BCTC and Student Services, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, thank you, President Cocker. We have not met for either one. For BCTC, we have not met since last month, and for Student Services, our next meeting is September 6th.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. BCIU and Curriculum Committee, Dr. Kennedy.
And neither the Curriculum Committee nor the BCIU has met since our last meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Berks EIT, Mr. Schlasman. Okay. Extracurricular committee, we have not met. However, our next meeting is next Monday, the 14th at noon. In addition, next Monday is also the official start of extracurriculars and definitely sports. So we will be out on the fields, 8 o'clock in the morning, welcoming the new athletes for the season and coaches. Favorite day of the year. Facilities committee, Mr. Case.
Thank you. We haven't met, but I'll just share some highlights. The operations team continues to make progress on putting things back together from the storm damage and getting ready for the first day of school. Mac Field is complete. There's a punch list item that was completed today, but Mac Field and all the turf was all completed, and it looks great. The contractor was also on site one last day within the contract, and they actually wound up doing Gursky Stadium, the grooming of it for free, so that was a nice bonus. The cadets were at our high school last week, and they have now left, but they sounded great. I heard them from miles away. I hope everyone else in town did, but it's a great partnership with Wilson School District to house them. And let's see, Lower House HVAC is on schedule, and all work will transfer to nights and weekends in the next few weeks for their final completion in December. Other than that, the next Facilities Committee is next week, August 14th at 4:30 p.m. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Finance committee, Mr. Negrini.
No report.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, so the budget has finally been passed, signed off by the governor. Additionally, they have voted to continue to give free breakfast to all students in the Commonwealth. That's it.
That's great. Thank you. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
I have no report.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Just a couple of quick items. So with the new school year approaching and just 2 weeks away, the PR department has been busy preparing and executing our back-to-school communications plan, which kicked off today. So families received a communication regarding online student registration, student schedule release dates, transportation schedule information, and food services updates. It was both an email and as well as a phone call reminder, plus a post on social media. We just want to remind families it's especially important for all families to complete the student information update that is now officially open in Skyward Family Access. We need this information to be provided so we can be sure that we have the most current information regarding our students. Prior to the start of the school year, there are details regarding how to update this information on the homepage of our website, including a tutorial screencast. Secondly, we wanted to let you know that we will be sharing the presentation and proposal that was presented at the beginning of the meeting regarding the recommendation for the new elementary school and renovations to Southern Middle School with our community. So we were planning and will probably continue to plan to share that via a thought exchange. And we will have further conversations as per the board discussion about additional opportunities for the community to review that information and provide comment. And we will certainly share all of that feedback in report form with the board. And then finally, just please remember again to our community to check all district communication channels over the next few weeks, especially because there'll be a lot of information shared as we approach the start of the new school year. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Troutman. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Thank you. We have not met as a Wilson Education Foundation since our last meeting, but I do want to share a couple of highlights and some of the things that have gone on this summer and also some future events. Some highlights for the Education Foundation. Summer Learning Camp happened this summer. The 2023 Summer Learning Camp was a great success. The program is offered to any students currently enrolled in the Wilson School District entering grades 1st through 5th. And the camps were held at 2 locations on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 9 to 11 a.m., running from June 13th through July 27th. So the purpose of these camps, it's to provide continued academic opportunities to help diminish the summer slide while having fun in an outdoor environment. And instruction is provided by certified Wilson teachers. It's been a great success the last couple of years. And camp incorporated hands-on STEM learning activities and strengthened language arts, reading, math, science, and social studies skills, and each week was a different learning theme. There were 76 students that attended this year. 64 were paid students, and the Education Foundation offered 12 scholarships, which we thank the Education Foundation for. and all the community members and businesses that donated as well. One of the things I did want to share, it's new for the Education Foundation, is the honor roll sponsorship opportunities. I'm going to leave these outside the door here. There'll be a couple here as well. But this is a great opportunity to, if anyone's interested in how they can partner with the Education Foundation. This is, talks about all the event sponsorship opportunities with regard to Wilson, the Iron Chef, Bulldog Bash, Wilson Community Night, and Fightin' Phil's, and then honor roll sponsors. So all the information's in here. I just saw this for the first time today, but I want to read through that, and then there's all sorts of ways that you can sign up and be a sponsor. Some of the great things about the Wilson Education Foundation this year, talked about the honor roll sponsorship opportunities. These are available to individuals and businesses who would like to donate to the Education Foundation and all the events that are held throughout the entire school year. It's kind of nice where you don't have to continually donate. You can maybe do it all in one shot, which kind of helps people, if you want to do it that way. So if you or any business that wants to be or is interested, brochures are available tonight, and you can visit the WEF website. And again, thanks to the generous contributions made each year, the funds help support, here's all the things, the annual venture grants, the scholarships for graduating seniors, annual graduation activities, district and community projects, summer learning camps, facility upgrade campaigns, Wilson High School iSTEM programs, community events, and teacher and student support. So again, I can't thank the Wilson Education Foundation enough, and all the folks that are a part of it, and just also partnering with the administration team and the foundation and the community. Like I said, I report out on it quite a bit, and usually it's a great beginning to Friday meetings when you have the folks that are receiving funds and the teachers that are putting these programs together with the help of the foundation, and see what they all do. And lastly, the Education Foundation Bulldog Bash is, we're going to be celebrating the 10th annual Bash event on September 30th at the First Energy Stadium with fellow Wilson parents, alumni, and WEF supporters. The event will include food, beverages, live music, auction items, and more. So join the Education Foundation celebrating this year's Friend of the Foundation award recipient, Redner's Markets. We will also be honoring the 2022-23 Teachers of the Year, Jennifer Richards of Green Valley Elementary and Alexandra Vicentish of Wilson High School. So tickets are on sale now. Information will be going out in the next Blitz and can be found on the Education Foundation website and social media pages. And then lastly, if you are really a planner and want to plan your calendars for next year, the Iron Chef, put it down, Sunday, March 17th next year. Everyone write that down, reserve the date, and our next board meeting for the Education Foundation is September 8th. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
It's going on my calendar right now, my favorite event of the year, so looking forward to it. There is no report for technology. We meet next on the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. That takes us into public participation from non-agenda items. Mr. Maravich?
I'll try to truncate a little bit. Individuals attending the meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is opportunity to offer comment on matters that may come before the board. The superintendent or his designee will handle questions. The board respectfully asks that you direct your comments to the board as a body. Clapping, calling out, or cheering, or conversations in the audience are not permitted. Individuals should make their comments from the speaker's lectern. It's 3 minutes. I provide a 1-minute warning. Anyone making threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or cited by local police. This is outlined in Board Policy 903, which is on board docs and the website.
Thank you, Mr. Maravich. First, we have Chastity Santiago, Title IX.
All right. Okay. Short and sweet. In May of 2023, the U.S. Department of Education communicated an anticipated date of October 2023 for the final Title IX rule. I've read the document that's available to the public on the Federal Register. I'm concerned, there's, some things that some parents aren't as into reading those federal documents as I are, so I'll share some of the information. the addition of authorized language of legal representative, which empowers not outside of parents, it empowers educational representatives to act on behalf of student without the parent's consent, giving them that legal authority. It doesn't require coordinators to turn over to students in a proceeding all the evidence uncovered by a school in an investigation. If a student requests the evidence, he or she will only receive the evidence that the coordinator deems to be relevant and not otherwise impermissible. This is taken right from the Federal Register, their exact words. They're updating pregnancy-related concerns to include termination of pregnancy and direct schools, colleges, and universities to make reasonable modifications for students because of pregnancy-related conditions, but yet nothing in that proposed rule of text prohibits or prevents education facilities from requiring institutions to provide abortion counseling and services as part of those reasonable accommodations, which I know will be concerning to some families, even if it isn't concerning to yours. It requires K through 12 schools to accept a child's gender identity regardless of biological sex without requiring the approval of a child's parents. I think that's important. No one's saying we're not welcoming them, but the parent should be notified. It opens our bathrooms, our locker rooms, housing accommodations, sports teams, and any other sex-separated educational program or offering to the opposite sex without the consent of the other students. It removes the requirement to use the same standard of proof for complaints versus its students complaining versus staff complaints. It defines sexual harassment so broadly that not using the correct pronoun could result in a violation. It will increase complaints and increase administrative needs and cost. Pennsylvania School Board Code of Conduct. Communities should be provided with information about its schools and be engaged by the board and staff to encourage input and support for the school system. Devoting time, thought, and study to our duties and responsibilities as school board members is critical in rendering effective and credible service. That being said, while this board is not responsible in any way for the proposed changes, you have an obligation to keep the community informed. So I ask, is the lack of communication to the community out of ignorance or intentional? Honestly, it really doesn't matter because the large overreach of these proposed changes wouldn't make it a difference on your answer. They're too important to see this as anything else but a failure.
Thank you for your comments. Tammy Keener, 3 different items.
Good evening. I haven't been here all summer. I bet you missed me. I had a really good game of golf today, so I think I'm going to be pretty good tonight. Anyway, I'm disappointed, and I think every single one of you should be embarrassed for June's. I watched the board meetings, whether I come or I don't. I am appalled that not a single one of you, me being a veteran, my father stormed the beaches of Normandy. Did you even mention to anyone or say any thank you to a veteran? No, you made it all about Pride Month. Way to go. Which is why I'm getting to an article right now that I have. Gen Z, this is out of the USA Today. We've got some pretty good polls here. You defend what you love, but you can't defend what you don't know. We are not teaching our children correct history. Here, it says right here in a Gallup poll, that Republicans at 60% are twice as likely as Democrats at 29% to say that they have a robust pride in the United States of America. If you are not happy here, I'll help you pack, and we can send you wherever you'd like to go for socialism or communism. Discrepancies in our national pride is even more pronounced among different age groups. I'm not concerned with elderly because they are proud. Gen Z generation is the one generation that I'm concerned with. The ones that are born between 97 and 2012. It's an increasingly important voting bloc, which is liberal, more liberal than any other generation, even at similar ages. It seems to be playing into the young children's pride and their lack of America. 85% of adults said they are extremely or very proud to be an American. Today, that has dropped 20% to points to 67%. Americans increasingly don't value God, country, or children. Gen Z harbors especially negative feelings about capitalism, which is what we're based on. I'm just upset after what I heard with this budget. This is crazy. It all starts in our schools, and this is your USA. This is your left-leaning paper and your left-leaning areas. There is a reason K through 12 education has become such a flashpoint in American politics. It's where, after all the nation's young people learn about the nation that they call home, maybe they aren't learning enough. It states here that children, hint, Biden and Democrats don't think it's the parents' right. Well, I'm telling you, we can't blame young people for not loving and defending what they don't understand and aren't taught. So with that, to the library. 2 Bibles and a Bible story. 619 is based on opinions and not facts. This is factual. Where do I hand these to, Chris? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
And I'm disgusted with you.
Ms. Randolph-Blatt, State Budget.
John,
1 minute, no, sorry.
20 seconds. I know everybody wants to leave. Mr. Snyder said the budget is passed. The governor gave you more money. I think it's time you consider no tax increase next year. It's too late for this year. Okay? It's your fault, too. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you for your comments. That ends the public participation on our agenda items. Do we have other business from the board? Mr. Martin.
This is actually a question for John. When students, come back to school and they sign the code of conduct and the parents, is that legally binding?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
It's part- yeah,
That's my
part of
question.
the discipline,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right, thank you.
I would just add, Mr. Maravich, if I may, there are variables that are outside of the code of conduct that also come into play when we make determinations regarding how we're going to handle disciplinary matters that are also legal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other business from the board? Looking for a motion to adjourn?
Schneider, so moved.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Seconded, meeting adjourned.